You can't take it with you when you're gone, so how do you make the most of it while you are here? It's time for Your Money Matters with Sam and Dieter from Harness Financial.
And Sam and Dieter are in the studio with me, and guys, I am going to be listening avidly, as I'm sure many other people would. We talked about last time, and we're going to talk KiwiSaver.
That's right. That's
Kick it off.
Yeah, we're going to talk growth. We're going to talk gains. Speaking of gains and growth, I was at the gym this morning. What about you?
Yesterday evening.
What about you? Have you been at the gym lately,
I was
Sean?
at the gym yesterday afternoon, actually.
Really?
Yeah. But I just had a sauna yesterday afternoon.
Oh, good. Have you been experiencing growth, gains?
Well, probably. The problem is I have been experiencing
the wrong kind.
The wrong kind. Yeah.
Accumulation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Today we want to talk about what is in your KiwiSaver, what's your KiwiSaver doing, or what's your managed fund doing when it is a balanced fund versus a growth fund. And we're not talking about gym growth, gym gains, we're talking about financial gains. Dieter, talk to us.
So what I think we need to do first is go back to the basic principles. What do they call now? The first principles basis. And it's to understand what is inside it in a general sense. So there's two categories of underlying assets, and then any KiwiSaver or managed fund. You've got income assets, you've got growth assets. Income assets are your cash, bonds, fixed interest. Your growth assets, property stocks, and equity stock market.
Why are they called income assets?
Because their sole purpose really is to give you stability, less volatility, although bonds have been pretty volatile. But they just give you a higher yield, so they're paying you a lot of income off that investment over time.
Okay, right.
But less of the capital growth over time.
And that's different to a dividend?
Yes, it's an interest rate, coupon rate paid on a piece of paper.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of Kiwi households, especially in the older generation, rely on those kinds of vehicles, don't they?
They do. So yeah, you have the perception of stability and of less volatility, but what you're really doing is you're sacrificing long-term growth and the ability to maintain purchasing power.
Right.
Throughout retirement.
Yeah.
So,
hey guys, I just want to remind people they can ring in with questions while you're talking about this.
Yep, that's right.
Look, another thing I want to throw in. People say risk as if they're trying to create the impression that I could lose my entire Kiwi fund. So, honestly, I'm not going to, am I? It's not going to evaporate overnight. Oh, a high risk fund. It sounds like I'm living life on the edge or something, or having a bungee jump. I'm not really, am I?
No, you've got to understand risk properly, which is just the volatility but long-term upward trend. So it's not a risk of loss in a well-managed fund, but you are going to have movements up and down, which is actually great if you're contributing.
Let's talk about trends. I know you've got some graphs there that you want to show us today.
Wow.
And before we get into this, I just want to stress that this is advice of a general nature and a conversation of a general nature. You should seek personalised advice. This is something that we can provide you, or your existing financial advisor can provide you. Don't make any decisions before seeking advice. So, what's this chart you've got sitting here in front of us, Dieter? Can we?
Well,
can I lift it up? Can't really. Can you see?
I'm not sure that works, guys.
No. This is sounds like
explain it.
So basically, I think I've mentioned this once before. This basically shows you the value of $10,000 in 1970 and what it'd be worth today if you're in different places. So inflation alone, and just think about this in the government's expenditure in the last 6, 7, 8 years. Inflation alone means $180,000 today is the same as $10,000 in 1970. You can buy the same things. So you extrapolate that forward and you're looking $300,000-$400,000 is the same as $10,000 in the next 20 years.
Good Lord.
So our money is being eroded on a regular basis just because of fiscal monetary policy. So how do you actually protect against that? Well, we look at the other assets you could have. You could have cash, you'd have $500,000. Property, surprise, surprise, $790,000. Not as much as we think it is. Australian equities, $1.9 million. World equities, $2.1 million. New Zealand equities, $3.4 million. Although it's quite small and quite high risk. But
what are equities again, Dieter?
It's basically every company from your Apple to your Samsung, to every company that produces something that's on a stock market somewhere.
Right.
So
equities in the stock market.
yeah, you own the companies that produce the things you use.
Look, I got this text and it says, can't call this I'm in a work meeting. That's going to be productive listening to the platform, isn't it? Should people contribute more than their employer matches to their KiwiSaver, or should they match the employer contribution and then invest elsewhere?
This is going to come down to the financial habits of the person. If they're not a saver, if they're unable to control their spending and then generally spend everything they get, then I would actually recommend contributing more to KiwiSaver. If they can control spending and if you've got good financial habits, only contribute the minimum, put the rest into a managed fund.
Because there are more tax efficient, more flexible options outside KiwiSaver, but KiwiSaver is locked in. It's locked down, which is good for some people.
Yeah. Well, to me, that is really the only outstanding thing about it, is that it does lock you in. It was literally designed to save people from their own bad habits, wasn't it? Yeah.
Very much so, and it's and even so, you look at Australia; they're contributing 11.5% to super. We aren't filling that gap enough yet.
Also want to ask, guys, did you have gold on your graph? Someone said, what about gold?
Gold is an interesting asset because ultimately it doesn't actually produce anything. And in the sort of very long term, it only sort of does about the same as inflation. But it is a good hedge.
All right. We got a call from Greg. The guys are there.
Good morning. How are you guys? All good?
Kia ora, Greg.
That's the story. Listen, on the superannuation, you're talking about losing money a wee bit here and there. Do you think it's fair that most people are going to have a KiwiSaver over 15,000? So that superannuation must legally go to probate if that person passes away. Now, probate, you're looking at what, $3,000 to $4,000 automatically. Do you think that that's fair? Simply because you can put bank accounts in joint names and houses in joint names, therefore that doesn't become part of probate. But because KiwiSaver can only be in one name, it then becomes probate.
Well, the first thing I'd say is life isn't fair. And we all know that. And the second thing I'd say is you can prevent that from being an issue by employing proper estate planning.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it is to also it's the size of the estate, whether it needs to go to full probate or not. If it's very simple and small, you're not going to be paying a lot of money. You can actually do it directly. So it's only when assets go over a certain value that you then need to have the full probate process.
Is that not the value of $15,000?
I'll have to double check. I'm not a lawyer on that side, but still.
Greg, can I ask you a tricky question? You don't have to answer, but do you have your wills and enduring powers of attorney arranged?
Yes.
Hey, wow, man, that's amazing, because only 50% of New Zealanders have a will, and about 50% of all wills are invalid.
I just lost my wife 8 weeks ago. So
sorry to hear that. That's terrible.
I'm right in the middle of issues with.
Well, I'd say, Greg, if you'd appreciate it, we'd love to offer you some free advice to help you during this time. Feel free to get in touch with us privately if you'd like. Do you have any other questions that you'd like us to address?
No, that's fine. I was just wondering about how if you can avoid probate, but it doesn't seem like you actually can if it's over the $15,000 mark and it's in a single person's name, aka KiwiSaver. So everyone's going to lose money on their KiwiSaver when they if someone passes.
Yeah, actually, when I think to all of the life insurance claims we've had in the last 5 years, every single one has been a terminal illness claim, except for one for a child, very sadly. So if you're terminally ill, people should know that you can actually withdraw your KiwiSaver early.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We had 5 weeks from start to my wife passing, so we didn't have time to do anything really.
Mate, so sorry to hear that.
But that's I think that's a crucial thing to get out to platform listeners, is that they need to be aware that there is some areas that they are going to lose money on when if it's over $15,000, and they're going to lose money on probate to lawyers.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a really good opportunity there, because if I look at South African systems, your retirement funds, you can nominate a beneficiary. So you could actually have it going directly to the beneficiary and avoiding the estate. And that wouldn't be a really big thing to do in KiwiSaver if you just nominate a beneficiary. But would it probably take 15 years of government legislation to do that?
Hey, Greg, look, you're obviously been through a thing. I just recommend you, no obligation, the boys are happy to help. Why don't you give Ben your number, and we'll ring with their contact details after the show, because, hell, I can't imagine what's been coming at you over the last few weeks. So it's a genuine offer from them. If you just want to sit down and say, how can I do better, mate?
Yeah, and no charge, Greg. No charge.
No problems. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Thanks for your help.
Cheers, Greg.
Cheers.
One of the real sort of gritty pieces of information we wanted to get into is, what does it actually look like comparing a conservative fund, a balanced fund, and a growth fund over an extended period of time? And you've run some numbers for today, haven't you, Dieter?
I have. I've taken a very simple scenario of someone 37 years old, 60,000 in the KiwiSaver, 100,000 income. If they're in a moderate fund, when they retire at 65, they'll have $600,000 there. If they go into a high growth fund, they'll have 1.27 million.
Whoa, that's different. And that's just one step, right? Okay.
Well, that's the conservative versus growth.
Yeah.
If you go balanced, you'd have 760,000. So it's very, very frustrating, because when you do a risk assessment, when you try and choose what fund you're going to go into, there's only one question that really matters.
Yeah.
Your personal bias is irrelevant. It's time horizon.
Yeah.
And people go with their personal bias because, it's conservative focus, and it's just going to be costing people money in the long term.
Well, look, I mentioned this to you guys. I get a notification, an automatic notification, you're turning 60 soon. We're going from a growth fund to a balance fund. And your Kiwi said, well, I didn't friggin' ask for it. And, I lose my bottle when I turn 60? So I wrote back and I said, no, you put me back in the growth. You put me back in the growth fund. If anything, you get more desperate the older you get. And you see the day when the gold card arrives. It would seem to me that is another disadvantage of, and I know it's there to keep us disciplined and guard us against ourselves, but when you're in a KiwiSaver, you do not have as much latitude to do what you want, and assumptions are being made about you or for you by the fund manager, right?
Especially in the automatic funds.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, especially if you're going direct, they'll have automatic age step, but they don't all do that. And there's also solutions out there now where you can have pretty much open architecture. For those who are keen, there's even a solution for KiwiSaver with 100% cannabis funds. You want really high returns. So there's a lot of options. There's actually more flexibility today than there was in the last 5 years.
We've seen a little bit of flurry with people choosing to put even their KiwiSaver, and I know you don't recommend this, in Bitcoin. You can do that.
Wow, of course. God. Sorry, I just...
Better than
Ben's
Ethereum.
looking keen.
Anything that keeps popping up in my X feed, I'm not interested in investing in. It feels like tulips in Amsterdam,
The key is, though, whatever you choose to do, don't rely on your own knowledge. Rely on experts' knowledge. Rely on Dieter's PI insurance, and Dieter's expertise. If something goes wrong and you've set it up yourself, well, kind of serves you right a little bit. It's a bit sad to say that, but it's true.
Yeah.
Yep, it's the DIY culture.
Yeah. Look, I hope you can help our friend who called in out. But I think it's such an interesting topic, and the best thing to do, guys, isn't it, is just to reach out to you and say, let's have a chat, let's see where you're at, and how do people do that?
There's just one thing I want to add in as a final sort of component. If you just compare a unnamed bank growth fund versus a focused investment firm, within the growth sector, it's a difference between 7.8% per annum over 10 years and 10.5% per annum over 10 years.
You said 7.8.
And that cumulatively is massive different year on year on year.
So don't just do what you did because you've always done it, and you go to the bank and they just do it for you. Get advice.
Okay, so how do they get hold of you guys? What number do you call?
021 0268 7955.
or www.harnessfinancial.co.nz. And you can now follow us on TikTok, sadly.
You've gone woke. Fantastic.
Facebook and LinkedIn.
Okay, let's get that. Well, we must talk about getting the information. Could you please not leave the studio during the financial break, because I've got a personal question I need to ask you.
Yeah, sure.
And get your thoughts on. Ben, let's go to the break.
Your Money Matters with Sam and Dieter from Harness Financial. To make the most out of your money, visit harnessfinancial.co.nz.